Welcome to the CTO Studio. Today I talked to one of my heroes. Someone that I met at a RubyConf, become friends with, and we talk about giving yourself permission not to finish some software projects. We get deep into Terraform and Hashi Corp. Take a listen.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Evan Phoenix, have you read the Phoenix Project?
No.
Oh, you should.
What is it?
Is
it a pamphlet that they give out at the grocery store?
It's a novel.
Okay.
A DevOps novel.
Oh, no, I have. Okay. Is this the one about the like weird calendar thing? Okay. I have read it. And this is okay. I absolutely have read it. And
we are not redoing this intro. We're going to keep this intro.
Okay, cool. So I absolutely have read it. And here's why I was confused, because I read it. The book is like 10 years old, probably.
Yeah.
And so I read it 8 years ago or something like that. And I was actually thinking about it recently, and I have a copy of it. Couldn't remember the title. Couldn't remember the people. I tried to look it up, and I was like, what do I look up again? Like, calendar fail? That's basically what I tried to Google, and I was like, it's just like people talking about how Google Calendar didn't work right. So I couldn't remember. Okay, now thank you. You've solved a mystery for me.
Oh, so literally now?
Yeah, absolutely, right now, because I had been wanting to go back and look at it again because we were talking about it at work, but I couldn't remember it. But now I know. Now I got to go see if I can find it amongst my books.
Isn't that the sign of the times when your heart rate goes up because you don't know what to tell the Google about the thing you're trying to find?
Like, what is do we want to go off on this tangent really fast?
This is what we're doing.
Okay. So there's a movie that I saw as a child. I must have been 6 or 7. And it was a Japanese animation, and it scared the living daylights out of me. And it stuck itself so deep in my psyche because it was so scary.
At the tender age of 7.
Yeah. That it stayed with me for forever. And so about 10 years ago, I was like, I have to figure out what this movie was, because it would randomly come up every once in a while. And it was that same thing. It was like, what do I type in? Can I show the machine something? Like, how do I get this picture out of my head? And so I would Google, every once in a while, I would Google like, scary Japanese animation unicorn 1980s, and I would find, here's the funny thing, I would find people those same terms on message boards saying like, does anyone remember this weird movie from the 80s that was like, this has a happy ending? 3 years ago, found the movie, and it's on YouTube. I watched it again, and I was like, why did I watch this in the 80s?
Oh, so even now you were like, oh shit, this is serious.
Absolutely. I thought to myself that I was living in Montana in the 80s. No, I was living in Wyoming. It depends on, I moved in the mid to late 80s. So one of those places, regardless of those two places, how did I get exposed to this weird Japanese animation?
Was it maybe some teenage kid through the VHS tape?
That's what I was thinking. That's what I'm wondering, because people have talked about seeing it on HBO in the 80s, and I was like, we didn't have HBO. We didn't have cable until the early 90s, until like 94, 93, something like that. And so we had 3 channels for most of the time I was growing up. So I don't know how it must have been someone who was babysitting me, or I have no idea.
And so were you able to sort of close the loop now?
I felt so much better. Actually, when I finally found it, I was like, this weight was lifted.
What was the key thing you told 7-year-old Evan after you just watched it? It was like...
it was less scary seeing it as an adult. And so actually, I got to kind of scrub all of those elements that I remember being like, this is the scariest scene I've ever seen. Like that was how I remembered it.
I feel afraid just listening to you. I'm like,
and I went and watched those scenes. I watched the whole movie again. It's not really that long. And I would watch those scenes that I remember being really scary. I remember thinking to myself as an adult, the sound designer on this movie was amazing, because that was actually the scariest part of this movie. Is because like I have all of these visceral memories of this like scary sounds and all this kind of stuff. And so
that audio memory.
Oh yeah.
You know, this happens to me when I try to find songs that I used to love as a kid, and I can just barely latch onto a lyric.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, I think this is what the lyric said. And then I have seen the thing where people are on message boards saying, does anybody have a copy of this song?
Yeah. I used to listen to, my mom would drive me around and just put the like top 40 radio on. And so like I have all these songs will come on randomly, and I'm like, I have this memory all of a sudden of like, I'm looking at the window on the landscape of Wyoming again. Like
Speaking of that, this is a brilliant segue. It might make you slightly uncomfortable.
After this conversation so far, I don't think it's possible.
So in about 08 or 09, I decided to lift my head from my startup and look around and kind of see what everyone else was doing. And I built my product, content management system as a service, in LampStack. And, Rails had sort of matured beyond fanboy status in my mind. And I was interested very much in Rails and microservices and looking at adding and innovating without lobotomizing by just adding on microservices and then slowly changing things. And Ruby, I joined the San Diego Ruby community, and I quickly became an organizer, apparently because I started SD Rails.
Yeah.
And I was so new to it, I didn't realize it was the same thing. I thought Rails was a thing and Ruby was a thing. Anyways. And I ended up going to a RubyConf, and Martz was there and DHH was there.
Yeah.
But the thing that my senses remembers, and I have that audio reminder of the whole conference, was your talk.
What was the talk?
It was about Rubinius.
Okay.
And I think you were...
was it in Denver? Was it that one?
I forget which one it was, man. But,
was it about a dune buggy?
I was a little starstruck. I am a little starstruck. Is that okay? let the audio listeners, I just touched Evan.
Mm-hmm. It was all consensual.
Thank you. It was profound. I mean, to me, you were like, I didn't understand what Rubinius was.
And I'm not sure I did at that point either.
Ruby. And I want to say that there was a little bit of contention in the air. I feel like you were setting the record straight on something, or there was something going on. I was too new to the community to know what it was.
Yeah.
But I will say that from my very first days in the Ruby community, to me, you were like the rock star.
Thank you.
I'm very, very happy to have you.
Oh.
And to then have a friendship with you is huge.
Warm fuzzies.
What is Rubinius? Is it still around?
Yeah. Basically the person who worked on it with me the most over the years, Brian Shirai, is still working on it, maintaining it, doing different things with it. I haven't worked on it in 5 years or so, but it's still kicking around. So
are you still? You're a prolific open source contributor, and I mean you build stuff.
Yeah,
it's still part at Hashi Corp. It's still part of your day. That's like
I mean I
What
build,
is your role at?
Yeah, at Hashi Corp, I'm the lead engineer on the private Terraform Enterprise. So we have a product called Terraform Enterprise, which is primarily a SaaS. And the project started a few years ago to basically, how can we let people install this as on-premises software? And so how to solve that quandary.
The last time we spoke, a couple of years ago, you were actually launching a startup also in the infrastructure space. Mm-hmm. Is that still around, or did you?
No, so we folded.
What was that called again?
Vectra.
Vectra.
Yeah, and so we were working on this. Was all we started it like about a year or two pre-Kubernetes, and so we were going to build a PaaS. We were going to do a bunch of other things. We worked on it for about a year before we realized I don't think we want to do this. And so we kind of we switched gears. We started building a piece of what I was thinking was going to be the largest strategy at the time, which was a logging SaaS that did structured logging.
Was that current.sh?
Yes, it was. Yeah. So that was current.sh. So we worked on that for, again, 8 or 9 months or so until we were sort of at the end of where our runway was in terms of money. And then we kind of had to figure out what we wanted to do. And I had some tearful weeks trying to figure out what to do. And I kind of decided like I didn't really like being a CEO. And so I was like, okay, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So we kind of folded up shop. And at the same time, we had talked to Hashi Corp about what we were doing and stuff like that. And they were like, why don't you come over and join us? So they kind of, they brought us all over.
So in a way, you get to do what you love,
yeah,
but with this amazing company.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of for me, it's the best case scenario, right? Like I didn't like being a CEO, but I liked being able to work on interesting problems and have some say in what I get to work on and that kind of thing. And so Hashi Corp is definitely allowed that.
Totally. For me, I've been programming since I was very young, and I basically built my career on building stuff. And 7 CTOs, which is a people business and a startup to get CTOs in the same room and to collaborate. I wake up at least one day a week where I think I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like I'm tired and, everyone go screw themselves. Like literally thinking, I cannot do this.
Yeah.
I'm not the person to do this.
I was feeling that every morning. So only one day a week. I'd say you're probably right on schedule.
Okay, thank you.
So.
That's a nice reframe. When did you just realize, why did you think you wanted to be a founder of your own company?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I think what every founder thinks they're getting when they started off, which is like, I've got control. I can do whatever I want to do. I can make the decisions if I don't want to do this, if I want to go fast, if I want to go slow. Like I get to be the one to make those decisions.
Which goes away though when you have investors, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It absolutely. Like we had basically just friends and family money, so we didn't have real investors that we were beholden to. But regardless, if we were at the phase where we were looking for investors, and so therefore we would be in that boat of trying to say like they're going to dictate speed to a certain extent, right? They're going to dictate how much risk tolerance you're going to have, right? When you're just by yourself or you're with one other person and you're like, I can make all these crazy decisions. I can finally use this thing I've always wanted to use. It's like, okay, great. Like it may be fun, but like the risk is really high for that. And so, yeah, if you're on your own, it's your own risk to take. But if you have other people's money and they've given you and they expect something back from you, they're going to kind of dictate your risk tolerance a little bit.
Do you feel like the job, or like what I realized as I started investing in my own ideas was that I thought that the tech was 90% of the problem and that the 10% you'd have to work on it, but it was only 10%.
Sure.
And I hate to say that that's build it and they will come. It wasn't really that. It was more like I have to invest in getting this tech thing out there ASAP. Meanwhile, I realize now that the tech is 10%, man.
Yeah. I mean, the actual, like, I have a friend who calls himself a professional typist. But the funny thing is that like, and he's very good at what he does, but like, we are physically typing 5% of the time, maybe, right? But other than that, I would say like, yes, the tech is probably 10%, but the like 25% before that is like, what are we going to build? Right? Like, like you so often, and being like, I'm always working on random hobbies and hobby projects and all kinds of stuff. And so for me, it's like, what do I really want to put my time into? Right. And so if you're a startup and you're like, I've got like the universe is open to me. Well, like a significant percentage of your time has to be spent like, what tiny little sliver do I actually want to take from this? And that's not really the tech. That's not the implementation. That's like, What is that
Yes,
little
yes.
sliver to do?
But do you think that you can free yourself from that enslavement by just saying, "Hey, I want to just do this for fun"?
Yeah.
Who cares?
And that's basically what I did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have my work stuff, which I love, but I still have tons of, like, I start a new weird project every couple of weeks just because. So the way that I like to talk about it is, people who are hobby painters, they're like, and you maybe you hear about them and you see a movie about them and someone goes into their garage and it's just full of half-started canvases and you're like, what is all of this? And they're like, well, I paint for myself. I'm just painting for me.
Yes.
That's what my GitHub page is. That's what my GitHub repository
Well, I think
is.
I saw 160 repos in there.
Oh, there's at least that many in there.
I literally saw 160 something.
Yeah. And it's
That's admirable.
yeah. Well, I mean, but half of them don't work because they're not for anybody else.
But I think that is the reframe is just do it because you it doesn't have to freaking be a business.
No, absolutely not.
And I think that I was listening to a podcast the other day and it was a technical podcast and they were just talking about what problem are you solving? Like, talk to your customers. And I just felt like, wow, did all of us engineers just become these wannabe, like mining for gold, hoping to strike it rich when really we probably started coding because of that craft and that enjoyment.
Right. Absolutely. In the same way that, if you do anything else, engineering, computer science specifically is such a weird thing, right? Because it's part art, part craft, part tradecraft, and I think you get into like a engineer wouldn't just go build a bridge because he just likes bridges. First of all, they might, but second of all, if they had the ability to do it on the regular, just like I'm going to build a brand new bridge today and I don't have to spend any capital time investment. It's just me on my couch building a bridge. They probably would.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, you would run into the house and call your wife and say, darling, come and look at the bridge I built in the back.
Yeah. And so I think that computer science is such a weird, there's so much normal engineering. How do I want to do this? And how do I structure this so that this won't break?
Yeah.
But there's also the artistry of saying how do I actually want this? What do I want this thing to do? And how should it feel? And all that kind of stuff that, I mean, I'm way more on the like, I'm a pragmatic engineer, but at the same time, I'm like, I just want to go crazy sometimes. I just want to like write something weird that doesn't make any sense and not worry about it.
I feel like my best moments like that are on long flights.
Oh, yeah.
I built a whole MVC reflection style thing in C inspired by Rails. And I was like, I called it Alpine.
Sure, yeah.
By the time I landed, I had Alpine MVC, and it was amazing.
I really hope that they keep the Wi-Fi prices on flights high to incentivize me to not use it. Because
because just to disconnect.
Yeah, before we had Wi-Fi on flights, you'd be like, I'm here in my own little world, in a little bubble.
And how many times have you thought, okay, I'm going to work on this project, and then when you do the go get you realize, oh shit, that package is not on my machine.
Yeah.
Then you have to go think of something else, and then you come up with brilliance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have absolutely had times on flights or somewhere where I didn't have internet where I've been like, okay, this is an interesting problem now. I have to constrain myself. I can't just go out and I can't look it up.
Can't Google it.
I can't Google it. I can't find a thing that might do this. So what can I do that's in this vein with just what I have in front of me, right?
And that's innovation right there, man.
And and the artistry of that is literally a painting exercise. Like people okay, you have 4 colors, paint a sunset. Well, you give me 4 shades of brown. Yeah. Okay, well, still paint a sunset.
And you're going to come up with something beautiful.
Absolutely.
Have you ever done the 4 marker challenge with your kids yet?
No.
Or you're going to blow their minds. Or they blew my mind.
Okay.
You basically have a bucket of markers and colors. You print out some Disney characters or whatever. Uh-huh. And then you all have to close your eyes and you have to pick 4 colors from the bucket.
Okay.
And then you have a competition on whose painting or coloring in is the most profound.
Oh, I like it. And
my kids are addicted to it. And I, honestly, as an adult, I often think, she's serious. But then I sit there and coloring in is quite an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
So, Rubinius, and then I know that you spent some time at Splice with our dear friend Matt.
Yeah, I did.
What's it like working for that guy?
On
camera.
On
hey,
camera.
Matt, he's looking at you, man.
He's wonderful. No, he's a dear friend. He's actually he's great to work for.
Robot voice.
Yeah.
Robot voice.
Robot voice?
Yeah, you're like.
He's great to work for. I love. Thank you for hiring me. No, so what's funny is it was pretty. This is
because you went to a Living Social. You guys have sort of walked apart together.
So I was his manager at Living Social for a little while before he left to go work on Splice. And this is I worked on Splice 5 years ago now. And so what happened was I left Living Social and I left it. I did one of those like ultimatum. Either this is getting done in 2 weeks or I'm going to quit. And it didn't get done. And so I quit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you proud of that, or were you?
Yeah.
Did you regret that?
Oh, it felt great. No, because I had gone through a lot of different things at Living Social just because of I had been hired. I was actually hired as like the director of platform, and I never actually did that job. And then I actually demoted myself at one point in time, so that I could actually like get some work done. And I got to the point where I was like, I really just want to get some. I really want to do this thing, and I had been told like, hold on, so many times that I was like, either it's getting done now or this is it. Anyway, so I left, and I'd already had in my mind like, oh, I should do a startup. Like this is right before Vectra, and so I was kind of mulling it over. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't do it yet. But I'd sort of left Living Social, kind of just no plan, figure it out, story of my life. And so I talked to Matt, and to say like, hey, I left Living Social. I want to do my own startup, but do you have any contracting that you have right now and stuff like that? He's like, oh well, yeah, I do have some stuff. Why don't we hire you so that you have health insurance and stuff like that, and then we can figure it out from there. I think they were hoping that my startup wouldn't work out and I would still be there, but that doesn't matter. And so Matt hired me. Matt, the tech team had gotten to the point where he didn't have the time to really be doing engineering anymore. He just flopped over on that point in time.
How large was the engineering team?
It wasn't huge. It was probably. I'm probably going to get this wrong. I'm going to say 7.
Okay.
But they were thinking a lot about their products, a lot about what they wanted to do, and so a lot of his time was spent like, they were working on the very beginning of the plugin store was being worked on there, and lots of other things. So he hired me, and basically I did what he no longer could do. So all of the random projects that were just on the floor, as it were, that he had been working on, he was like, can you just take these over and work on them and do whatever? I'll give you some random stuff to do. And I was sure, okay. And it was I had some really interesting weeks that were super fun. Like there was one week where I worked on I was working on the first version of the plugin store, and I ended up writing a C library then I wrote some Objective-C to do the client, and then I wrote some Ruby for the backend, and then I wrote some Go for this other piece, and then I wrote some JavaScript for this other piece, so that you could click on a button and it would go through all the cycle and then install this thing. And that was super fun. It was a whole week. I worked on 6 little pieces of the same pipeline in 6 different languages. So that was a lot of fun.
And did you then manage the engineering team
Me?
as well?
No.
Okay.
No, he was doing all of that.
So he was doing that.
He was
there were some software projects that he needed someone to work on.
Yeah, he's like, I really need this. I worked on a library to fingerprint digital audio files. That was just
in Python, or
no, it was in C, because they needed to use it in the Mac client and the Windows client. So it was I need this thing and it needs to be in C, and here's what it needs to do. It's okay, we'll sketch it out and I'll go off and implement it.
I built a little something like that in Python with sort of a Shazam thing.
Oh, it was not nearly that complicated. It was really just that the different, if you loaded in a 16-bit sample into a random DAW and you saved it, sometimes what would happen is that DAW would convert it to, in a lossless way, it would convert it to something else. So it'd be oh, I actually like stuff in big endian,
Yeah,
not little
yeah,
endian. So
yeah.
it would resave that file in a different format. So whereas if you like just did a SHA of the files, they would look different. But it was really the exact same sample. And so this was just something that would go in and like understand an AU file or a WAV file enough to remove all of those things about this specific byte encoding, but still be able to just give you like, this is a big.
So that regardless of the encapsulation or the change,
Right.
you'd still know it's the same sound.
Yeah. So yeah. And I used an existing C library to do that and just wired it all
How
together.
How did you get into Go?
From Matt. And so I was not really working on Go before Splice. And so Splice had a bunch of Go code. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. I should work on this. I like working on this. But right before that, when I was thinking about my startup, was sort of early Docker days. And so we were thinking about the paths and how that would work and stuff like that. And Docker being all in Go, and we were like, okay, there's this thing and it's getting hot, and what does it look like, and does it work? And again, this is 5 years ago. And so I started reading a lot of Go code in Docker to try and figure out like, okay, what is it doing? How does it work? And that kind of stuff. So those are my first couple of things. And then it kind of just fits where I want to be in the stack a lot of times, which is that I have done tons of C and C++, but I don't like it. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of it. I feel like all the time I run into like, okay, how do I want to like account for this memory, and how do I want to do this, and how do I want to do that? And on the other side of things, if I'm working in Ruby or in Python or something like that, I'm like, I really want to write this thing that's just a little too low level for where this language is. And so Go ends up being that thing that's sort of, I mean, I'm not saying anything new for Go programmers, but it's like right in that little between area.
And was Rubinius your attempt to give you that low level protection for the Ruby language?
A lot of it, yeah. I mean, like, so some of the stuff that we worked on, obviously we were working on a JIT compiler, working on a garbage collector. I think those are all just really interesting problems to me. That was why I started working on them in the first place. Because you want to try to say like, okay, like how fast can I get this thing? Could I really work on it in this particular capacity? Could I write a network server in like a high performance network server in this language? Some of the other stuff that kind of came out of it that where I was trying to feel like how low can I get this thing was like I wrote the original FFI layer that was inside Rubinius that got ported over and is used elsewhere because I was like, okay, I want to like write some Ruby code and I want to just glue in this C function. I want to glue in this thing from over here, be able to just kind of work on it pretty seamlessly. So, I mean, I would say Rubinius probably was not even low enough for where I actually think my sweet spot is now. But it was an attempt to try and pull that down. So, yeah.
And have you played around with Rust?
A little bit. Now that the lifetime thing is easier, of course, for the last couple of years, it's a little bit easier for me to read. I haven't written very much. I've mostly just read at this point. Let's see. Zoe was 2. So this is 5 years ago or so. I tried to do a Christmas project in Rust. This is like a normal thing for me. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be like visiting people. I'm going to have a week where I just like, I can let my mind wander. I'll work on some weird project. And so I was going to write like some random thing in Rust. And I think I got 3 or 4 hours into it. And I was like, I do not understand how any of these lifetime identifiers work. And I was like, I'll just go watch college football instead. It's better now from what I understand. It's simpler. It's easier to work now. But,
and so is Go, like, are you passionate about where Go is going? And like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not passionate about anything the way that people are passionate about like generics in Go, like in anything in my life. I'm not that passionate. I'm interested to see where they decide to take things. I think that there's, I completely understand both or all three, the quadratic equation of the positions on those sorts of things. So I'm like, I kind of just, I'm happy for it to fall out wherever it falls out. Like for instance, if it never happened, we'd be like, okay, fine, we'll just figure out a different way to make it happen.
And is just as a sort of just to clarify a little
Yeah.
bit, generics in a response to like interfaces or
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it in sort of like Rust or C++ terms, where you've got some, like in C++ it would be a template. I forget what it is in Rust. I think it's just a thing that takes a type parameter that you can. I want to say this is a thing, and I want to be generic. I want it to be not concrete. I want it to, when I instantiate this thing, I need to say like, oh, and I want one of these, and I want it with type, like I want an atomic operation, and I want it with an 8-bit integer or a 16-bit integer or 32-bit integer or whatever, right? So yeah, something that takes types
can
as
take
well.
any of that. Yeah, and that. I mean, I have a C background, and I in many ways Go to me is like
Oh yeah,
the thing it appeals to everything that is C in me with but the part that always just I end up sort of, so I'm more of a volatile prototyping kind of coder. I like to just prototype ideas
my favorite kind.
But I always find that I'm struggling against types. Like, oh my goodness, this method just it works, but now I have to accommodate for there's this. It's not always going to be the uint of 32.
Sure.
And then I'm like, oh, now I have to take 2 steps back. And so did I think about it incorrectly, or am I banging my head against the idiosyncrasies of the language? And is it necessary to be so stuck up about types right now?
I mean, I don't get particularly hung up on them, but I think that when I sit down to write something, I have a rough map of where I want to go with it in my head, and such that like the types that come out when I'm working on it, I don't really care. I kind of just like, oh yeah, I'll just make it an 8, like I'll just make it an int 8, or I'll just like in Go, at least there's some default decisions. Like I'll just make this an int. I don't really know what I just, so I'll just go on with it.
You just kind of take the broadest bucket you can take.
Yeah. Unless I specifically am working on something where I'm like, okay, I know that the width of this integer, for instance, makes a difference. And so I will think about it in those terms. I'll be honest. This is, I understand the cognitive bias of saying like, I don't feel like I need generics in Go, but that's because we don't have them. So I don't, there are definitely instances where I'm sure I would have said, oh man, if I had a way of abstracting this such that I could use it 3 or 4 different ways, that would be nice. There are some specific cases, like the trivial cases that get used in generics, that like I would write a min function. And okay, well, what do you want to write this a minimum function over? Okay, well, the universe of type, like that kind of thing. But yeah.
Wow. So as a family man, when do you code on your hobby projects? You have 2 beautiful humans.
I do. 2 daughters.
You have a wife who loves you.
I do. And a cat who kind of loves me.
What is the name of the cat?
Fog. She's all gray.
How do you manage your time as a family man then with the coding projects?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I try to be as kind to myself as I can about those sorts of things. So, there has been times where I've been like, man, I feel like I'm not getting any time to work on these projects. And what does that mean? And now I try to be kinder to myself to say like, if I don't have the time to work on them, I don't. That wasn't your question, but the times that I do have are, like I'll talk to my wife and I'll say like, hey, like I really want to work on this project tonight. Like, okay, great. No problem. I've got a book I'm reading, or I want to go work on this other thing too. And so I'll go work on it in the evening. If I want to, work on it, and our youngest is 4 and we still institute like weekend nap times. And so they're like, okay, like you're going to go take a nap for 2 hours. I'm going to go work on this thing for 2 hours. But again, I try to be kind to myself to say like, there have been times where I'm like, okay, great. I've got this 2 hours upcoming. I'm going to make all this progress on this thing. And I like will build it up in my mind. And then the 2 hours will arrive and I'm like, I think I just want to play Overwatch for 2 hours instead.
Oh,
and that's totally fine. And I have to be kind to myself about that kind of thing.
That is interesting. I relate to that.
Yeah.
It's like when the time comes, you've been waiting for it all morning and you're like, I just don't want to do this right now.
I in the same way that like I was sort of talking about it as, being a hobby painter, I kind of think of it in that same way, right? Like if you sit down to do it and you're like, I just don't have the energy, I just don't have the mental energy, then don't do it. You're doing it for fun, right? Right? It's not a job. It's supposed to be.
Lost that. I think I lost that. I'm 46, and I think startup life has robbed. Well, I don't want to be a victim, but I feel like I have been caught in a rut of every single character that I press out of my fingertips has to contribute to some monetary opportunity. And if you're not doing that, then why?
Yeah. I mean, like, I definitely don't feel that way.
Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I have gotten, I don't want to feel that way. And I think that for years I would feel like, well, I can't work on that because that's not going anywhere. And I got to the point where I was like, why do I bother? Like, what is like, there's no one here. It's just me.
I'm having this, my boss is telling me I can't work on this.
Yeah. So what I do now is if I sit down, what I've started to do is identify two separate emotional states. One is that the one usually that accompanies the like, okay, I've got 2 hours upcoming and I'm gonna get some work done, right? That is a separate thing from I'm gonna work on project X, like, and I have the energy and and project X is appealing. Those are two. I've worked on divorcing those things such that feeling of like, oh, I want to get something accomplished. I want to do something. I want to have some creative energy. I want to exercise. If I sit down and this thing that I've worked on before, I'm like, oh. Then sometimes I'll just start a brand new thing. I'll just be like, okay, cool. Like, what is that random idea that's bouncing around in my head? Okay, I'll just work on that for 2 hours. So I don't really care.
Now, let me ask you a question. When you read books, do you finish them?
No.
So you basically give yourself permission to say, you know what, I kind of got it.
Yeah.
This is it. I'm done.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I have worked on. I try to work on as much as I can, being honest with myself about like, this is my own happiness, right? Like I'm bleeding days, I'm bleeding hours away all the time right here. I should be doing the things that I want to be doing for my own happiness.
I feel like I'm on that journey right now.
Yeah.
You're watching that happen. I showed our friend Matt a little prototype I was building the other day, and he was mighty impressed and loved it. And I was like, oh, but now I just have to, like, I feel like I've solved a problem that no one has, and how do I map this back to the market? And he just looked at me and was like, dude, you just built something really nice.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. It was just for you. Like I have written the same weird crypto peer-to-peer program like 4 or 5 times at this point. And I keep thinking like, well, like what does that say? I think all that says is that I really like the beginning of that project. That's all it says. I just don't like the middle or the end. And so I just keep going back and starting over at the beginning. Maybe I will do it. Maybe I will get to an iteration where I was like, oh, now I want to do the middle. But I just haven't gotten there yet.
I'm so in love with the beginning of this project. I can just see CTOs say to their CEOs, oh, I just love the beginning of this project so much.
And I mean, if you're your own CTO of your own life and your own happiness, then you start it 5 times, and who cares?
No, I think that is a rule to live by. I feel like I'm going to give myself permission. I have about 6 or 7 things that whenever I'm in that context, I think, oh, this is going to be so fun to do that. And then somehow I get bumped out of that context into the other one. I'm like, oh shit, okay, there's this one as well.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'm just paralyzed. I'm like, I'm just gonna watch BoJack Horseman.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, but the thing you have to give yourself permission to do is that, like, do you feel guilty after watching BoJack? Like, do you, at the end of that episode, you're like, oh, I feel guilty again here because I was going to get all this work done and I just squandered half an hour.
I actually don't feel that way.
Good. Because I have absolutely had times where that would happen, where I'd be like, oh man, I just squandered it again. You know, like I tried, and now I'm just like, well, if that's what I wanted to be doing with my time right now, then that's what I did. I do have projects that the other aspect of this sort of equation is I have projects that are done. Like I have software projects that are finished. I wrote one actually really early on in Vectra that Vectra didn't go anywhere. Kern didn't go anywhere. This project I wrote, and I was like, I'm just going to write it soup to nuts and be done, put it out there. And it's used like it's used, it got picked up and it's used inside Kubernetes now.
What is it?
I wrote a Go JSON patch library, and it's just JSON patch. It doesn't, it has like three operations. It's kind of like apply a patch, make a patch, and then like manage a merge patch, which is a different, like there's 2 RFCs that it implements, but it's done. It implements the RFC. I get occasional bugs where people are like, hey, it doesn't do this right. I'm like, okay, yep, I'll merge your thing, done. But like that is interesting from the other side of this, which is that like, you know, you've got projects that you're continually starting, but let's be honest, have you ever worked on a software project that's finished, like actually finished, not just like we've decided not to work on it anymore, right?
Yeah, no, that's.
And so this was really interesting for me because I was like, I'm done. There's nothing else to do. If the bounds of this problem space are bigger, it's not in this package. It just doesn't. That's some other concern. And so now I know, and that was good for me because now I understand what it looks like to have a finished project, which is fine, but it doesn't. I like that people use that piece of software. That piece of software, I'll be perfectly honest, doesn't bring me joy. It's there. It's a liability. It's a burden for me, but it's not a big one because it's done. But it's not like, and so having finished a piece of software, now I realize that the joy is not in the finishing.
Oh,
right? Because
right.
I finished something, and now I'm like,
okay. And now you
have
have to do merges, and you have to field.
Right. So the joy is at the beginning. The joy is all about the like, oh, I've got this crazy idea that I just want to go implement.
I read the Walter Isaacson book on Leonardo da Vinci, and it was always interesting for me how he was on consignment to do all these amazing statues and paintings, and how he just struggled through those.
Yeah, you want to talk about somebody who starts things and never
but
finishes
then
them.
His notebooks are like all these unfinished, thousands and thousands of unfinished ideas.
Right, because the creative energy, the joy for those things is not in the finishing. It's in the
that is
like
profound.
Yeah, I mean, like like the flying machines and stuff like that. Those he's not doing those and being like, what's a better way to get from Milan to Rome? He didn't write those for that, right? He just wrote those because they're like, this is a crazy idea. What if it's a spinner thing? What if it's like a man that looks like a chicken, right? I mean, like,
wow, man, I love it. Are there any conferences that you're going to or speaking at that's exciting you? Or
I haven't really been like, so I'm still involved with Ruby Central.
You plan conferences?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So those,
I plan conferences now.
We should plan conference. No,
that doesn't work. I mean, it almost worked.
You know, Ruby Conf used to be like right after Uppsala for a few years. Like they were like, oh, that there'll be similar crowds and stuff like that. I don't think that lasted too long. A couple of years. That was before I was there.
So I started this little CTO conference, which I call 0111, and so I kind of went into this whole conference planning thing a little bit.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself is incredibly rewarding. I mean,
talk about something that you never finish. Yeah.
All conference planning is unfinished.
Yeah, the event just occurs and you're like, okay, I guess we're
somewhere
done.
in the planning phase, the event actually occurs.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, I guess we're not going to finish this. We already did the event.
What are you seeing at RubyConf and RailsConf? Like, what are you seeing like 2018, 2019? What's happening?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that we get this question fairly often when we're talking to people about the conferences, which is
Is Mart still alive? Is he?
Maybe he's doing great. still alive. Still comes. He's very, he is very gracious with his time. So, you know, like we schedule the conference, we talk to him about when we're going to schedule it, and he's always there. So, and same with DHH, with RailsConf, we talk with him about his time and make sure that he can come and all that kind of stuff. And There's been one instance where he couldn't make it, but for the most part, again, super gracious with his time. I think the interesting thing for me is people say like, well, I thought that like JavaScript was the new hotness, and so like, do people still go to RubyConf? People still go to RailsConf? Yes, is the answer. Our attendance hasn't dropped off, but I think the interesting thing for us is we always ask like, for how many people is this your first time at this conference? And for both of them, we get about half, which is a huge number to think about. To think that like every year this is someone's first RailsConf, and this is someone's first RubyConf, and there is a core group that is coming, that has been to all the conferences. But I would say that represents maybe 20 to 30% of the total number of actual attendees. That a huge number is people who.
That is amazing, and we're talking like attendees in the high hundreds or thousands.
Thousands. So RubyConf is around 800. RailsConf is around 1,200 or so.
I would be interested to know how many people go the second time.
There's a drop off. So if you have 50% that are brand new, I would say probably 30%. This is their second time.
And are you still involved with Ruby and RailsConf because it's sort of just it's your people, it's your tribe, you love it.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely. I mean, it's far more.
I just saw your eyes change a little bit. You had a sense of belonging.
No, it is. I mean, for me, it's way more about community than it is about the actual technical stuff at this point, right? Like I cut all of my professional chops in the Ruby community, and I have tons of friends that are I know from the Ruby community that are still there, that like I go to those conferences to see them and to hang out with them and stuff like that. And I think that the thing that we talk about is that we know that that's true for other people, and so it's important that we make sure that we have an environment in which those people who feel like, oh, I want to be coming back and I want to be seeing my friends and I want to be doing that, can still feel like it's their conference as well, right? We don't want to make it. We still have 50% new people, so we're like, okay, we always make this joke. Can we should we have another testing track like that? We always have that joke because it's been every time, and then we say to ourselves, 50% of people are brand new, so you could literally do the same conference, the exact same talks every single year, and you would still hit. You still would not. People would still be like, oh, it's a great talk. I'm glad I'd never heard any of this stuff before. We don't do that, obviously, but that's the important thing to remember, is that we're as a conference organizer that has all these new people all the time, it doesn't have to be every session doesn't have to be something you've never done before.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I'm learning as well is that the camaraderie of people seeing each other again. I think as an organizer, you're tempted to go down the other route, which is the celebrity speakers, the cutting edge topics, and then time and time again with the survey feedback, it's just people just loved the way they felt connected. And
yeah, absolutely, and we get that a lot in our surveys. We try to make sure that the space is conducive to like people just hanging out and like having that kind of thing. We try to make sure that there's, I guess, not to poo-poo my own event here, but like I try to make sure that there's at least 2 or 3 talks that I would want to go to at the conference. And the reason is that like I understand that I represent a very weird slice of the Ruby and Rails community, having been to so many conferences and having an in on so many topics and speakers and all that kind of stuff. And so I like to think that like if I can make sure that like I would want to go to this talk and I want to go to this talk and I would want to go to this talk, that I fulfill sort of those slices. And so that's actually one thing that we do at the program committee as well, is try to make sure that you would want to go to some of these talks, right? And therefore the program committee helps us represent those different slices of personas of people that would want to do things, right?
And is Ruby still more the purists and the systems type people, and Rails more the application developers? And I think I used to
a little bit, yeah.
One was more commercial than the other one, is what heard people saying.
Yeah, RailsConf is definitely the more commercial one. Like we put we always have a big sponsor hall. We, make sure that it feels that way. And that's a really carryover. O'Reilly used to do all of that on the show management side before we took it over in 2012. And so we've basically kept it the same since then because we felt that was a good, like that's what sponsors wanted that. People liked having a big sponsor hall and being able to go and interact with the sponsors and having a slightly larger conference feel. Whereas we think of RubyConf as sort of the more community conference. Some people would say that it feels like it's just thrown together. It's very much not thrown together. We actually try to make it feel a little bit like, oh no, we're just our friends getting together. Let's just invite 800 of your friends and let's go to a conference. We actually want to make it feel that way because it feels it helps people feel like, oh, it's just this authentic community atmosphere.
And honestly, that's how I went to a few, and that's how I felt. I felt more disconnected from the Rails conference than I did from the Ruby conference. And to DHH's credit, I remember standing in line to shake his hand, and for that minute, I felt like the most important person in his world.
Yeah. I mean, he's, again, so gracious with his time. We love having him.
So can I go back a little bit to Hashi Corp and Terraform?
Sure, absolutely.
So as someone who isn't actively scaling a company and who feels like every morning I wake up, there's a new AWS service or a new something.
Doesn't feel that way.
What is Terraform?
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's in the context of a suite of products that HashiCorp does. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely.
And then if you could just kind of slip in what exactly Kubernetes is.
Yeah.
In a way that will make me feel like I actually knew what it was as opposed to like, oh shit, I should have known what he just said.
Sure. So
be gentle is what I'm saying.
Okay, be gentle. You're going to have to remind me in case I go off on a tangent here and bring me back. So Terraform is a orchestration tool. Well, okay. Because that's a meaningless word in this context. So let's say that you have decided, you know what, like I want to use the cloud. I want to put stuff in AWS. It's just the easy one to use. And so AWS gives you a whole bunch of services, and you think about them as sort of primitives, as things that you can use to implement your thing, right? So you might decide, okay, well, I need to use a database, and I need a place to put like uploaded files, and I need a server to run this thing on. So AWS, Terraform doesn't help you understand how to map those concepts to the AWS ones. You have to do that on your own. But once you've done that on your own, you decide, okay, well, I'm going to need an RDS database, which is their database product. I'm going to need an S3 bucket, which is their place to basically store any blobs. And I'm going to need an EC2 instance, which is just a place to run whatever programs you want. And so you absolutely can go through. They have a console that you can go through, and a web console. You can click through and make RDS instance. You can type in some details. Make S3 bucket. You can type
which is the
details.
world I'm in.
Yeah, and that's not very common. So let's say you did that, and now let's say you need to do that 50 times because let's say you have 50 apps, 50 microservices that all use different databases or whatever it might be. The management of trying to understand what's this EC2 instance used for, and what's this over here, and what's that over there, and how does this work together?
I've had that feeling with like 4 EC2 instances.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, what is this again?
Yeah. So what Terraform does is it gives you a place to define all of those things that you wanted, and as well as treating it like code so you can abstract it. So you can be like, okay, I want an EC2 instance, and these 50 are all the same. The only difference is the color, something like that. So you can abstract this idea of an EC2 instance into a module, and then you can basically invoke that module to say, give me an EC2 instance. And then what you can do is you can say, give me 50 of those instantiated with different colors.
Now, is this the world, when I had my startup, is this the world of Puppet and Ansible? And
It's a little bit below it.
A little bit below that.
A little bit below that level, right? So in the case of Ansible and Puppet and stuff like that, those are typically, they have grown functionality similar to Terraform over time, right? Like I know Puppet has a bunch of modules to like create databases and interact with AWS things and stuff like that. So you can do similar things, but I think that at least I typically think of Chef and Puppet and Ansible as the like, I have a computer somewhere and I want to configure it to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
Right?
Whereas Terraform is more, this is the way we like to deploy, or this is the DNA of our infrastructure.
I guess an analogy to use would be like Terraform is the thing that like puts the roads down and all of the houses and where all the mailboxes are and stuff like that. And Chef and Ansible and Puppet are the things inside the houses of how you decorate it. Right?
That's helpful.
And so
it's open source.
It's open source.
And Hashi Corp does the managed service of that.
Yeah, so we have Terraform Enterprise, which gives you a bunch of collaboration features that aren't in the actual open source.
Okay, and is that what you're doing?
Yeah. So what I work on is private Terraform Enterprise, which is the on-premises version of our sort of the app that is normally in the SaaS. Yeah.
So when a CTO is listening to this and they aren't using Terraform, and they are manually configuring things, or they're using a different service, which I think Amazon's is CloudFormation. When should they say, okay, it might be a good time for me to explore using Terraform?
Sure. Yeah. So there's, I'll do the first one first and the second one second. So the easy one, if you're thinking about should I use Terraform, is to say, go in and look at your bill. And can you explain what every single line item is on your bill? And if there are things on your bill where you're like, I don't know what these EC2 instances do, then it might be time to think about using Terraform. One of the things that Terraform,
which is really early on. I mean, it's
like nowadays, exactly. Like nowadays, that's any time you've gotten like almost pre-production, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the ironic part is that adopting Terraform early is easier than adopting it later.
Which is what's going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. The
second question was around CloudFormation and Terraform.
So the difference between, I remember what my point was before, which is one of the big features of Terraform is that you're defining it as code. And as a result of that, you check in your layouts into a VCS. So you check it into GitHub or wherever you might be using. And as a result of that, when you're trying to figure out like, who did this? Like who added these instances? You can go back in your VCS and you can say like, hey, Scott, did you really need 12 Redshift clusters? Oh no, you mistyped that. You meant 1. Okay, well, let's go fix that. And the thing about fixing it,
Scott, if you're listening, that's kind of a way to manage you right now.
Yeah, I mean, like get some code reviews. But the nice thing about Terraform is that you change that 12 to a 1 in your Terraform config, and you tell Terraform to apply that, and it says, okay, I'm going to go delete 11 Redshift instances, and it just basically does that for you, right?
So if so one of my challenges just as I'm prototyping things is always where do I put it to make it go live? So, you can go to Heroku, you can fire up those instances. Could Terraform be a way for me as a lone coder to just document, like, how we all used to git push our shell scripts?
Yep.
And is it a way for me to just have my deployment strategy in my back pocket?
Absolutely. I mean, I have used it in that exact same capacity on AWS, where what I'll do is I'll have something that's like, I needed a database, I need this other thing, and then I needed an EC2 instance. I mean, you have to craft it a little bit specially because, like in the case of EC2, what you end up doing is there's a way of injecting just a shell script to run on boot, right, in an EC2 instance. And so that is one just quick and easy way, like, okay, go run this thing. And maybe that thing is going to run Ansible, maybe it's going to run Chef, maybe it's just going to like download your program and then just run it on a port and just, okay, we're good to go.
Do you make it easy to manage all the security credentials and the IAM profiles and all that stuff?
There are Terraform resources, which is the primitive for the thing that exists out there for IAM roles and all that kind of stuff. So you can go through and you can define a Terraform module that's basically just like, how did I want to set up the users? Oh, I wanted to make a user called Evan, and I wanted to give him these permissions, and I want to do that sort of thing. So yeah, you can absolutely manage it that way.
And then where do the private keys go?
So in the Terraform, so after you run Terraform, what you get is a state file, which is just basically like what is the lay of the land? What did I do in this particular instance? And that's how, by the way, when you change that 12 to a 1, it knows I need to go delete 11 of these because it tries to reconcile the state file with what it has defined, right? And so in the case of those secrets, they actually end up in the state file. So you have to keep your state file secure. And that's one of the things that Terraform Enterprise does is it actually does state file. It holds the state file for you, and it does all the encryption and all the management of your state file, so you don't have to do that. There are built into the open source version, there are ways of managing your state file. So you can manage your state file by pushing it out to S3. You can just have it on disk, and we don't usually recommend people checking it at VCS, but we know people do it. And then
put it on a USB stick and put it on your keyring.
Absolutely. Perfectly valid place to put it. And so in that side, that state file would have your secrets, and you could go in and you could run like Terraform state list, and it would give you a list of all the resources. And then if you were like, and one of those would be like an AIM user or AIM role with a name, let's say Evan. If you did show on that one, it would show you could look at like the keys. It would give you the access key and the secret key.
So then in your dev team, no one is logging into a console and doing anything. It's all happening through a Terraform script or something.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you may log into the console to double check something or go look at billing history or something like that, but you try and shy away from going in and clicking and making a bunch of things because then they're not tracking them.
Not tracking it. No, I love that. We
didn't answer about CloudFormation. You want me to answer that one?
We haven't, and you also haven't slipped in the Kubernetes thing yet.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay. But I want the second answer as well. But I do want to just say,
yes.
With Terraform, do you have to specify an AWS account, or does it obfuscate the whole cloud, the infrastructure? So what I did in Amazon, I can also do in Google or
good question
or Azure.
Yeah. So it does not. It is not agnostic. So when you make a thing on AWS, you have to do it with the AWS related primitives. And the reason was a very specific, they did this on purpose when they were working on Terraform really early on, Mitchell and Armand. They made this decision because to not abstract it, but instead to give you the tools to write the abstraction yourself if that's what you needed, because the common denominator amongst that you would have to be agnostic amongst all those three would be not really useful, right? It'd be like, oh, I want a computer, and here's an SSH key, and give me a computer with an IP address like that. Because, like, for instance, how do you do the security of an instance between AWS and Azure? Totally different. Security groups and what all of the things you have at your disposal in order to secure them are completely different. And so there are folks who make modules that are meant to be more agnostic, but they have to leave these big holes in functionality because they just don't map.
So if you are, the point you're making is if you are baking redundancy into your Terraform strategy, you can just go and programmatically do that.
Yeah.
So when you say computer, it's a label for other.
Exactly. It can just be a module called server. And inside that thing can say like, okay, yeah, I wanted to make, this is a server to make it on Azure, and this is one to make it on AWS.
I do have a world where I wish that instead of saying Siri or Alexa or Google, we were saying computer.
You can turn that on. You can make your Echo respond to computer. And then you can talk into your mouse and you can go, hello, computer. Computer.
I'm excited for that world.
Okay. As for CloudFormation, this is a good segue to that answer, which is CloudFormation is AWS only. So if you wanted to be able to orchestrate things that are not AWS related, that would be where Terraform comes in. And like the simple example here is just that like you use a different DNS provider and you want to set up a DNS record and it's not Route 53. There's a Terraform provider probably for that DNS provider. You can go set that up, right?
You mean in the sort of the public domain?
Uh-huh.
What I mean is someone's already done that.
Yeah. There's tons of modules. There's tons of modules that provide
so beautiful.
Tons of resources throughout, vast swaths of services out there.
What is this common theme with you, like this whole infrastructure thing?
I think it's fun.
I guess I just want to ask.
Yeah.
I want to know how you got into computing as well as part of your answer.
Yeah. I kind of got, well, I mean, like I got a computer when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And I loved upgrading MS-DOS on it. No, I did. Like I distinctly remember going to Software Etc. in the mall and getting the MS-DOS 622 update disk and being like, yes, I wonder what's going to be on this puppy. So I think that the way that the computer has to operate at that sort of that below the shine level is almost more interesting than the shiny part. Why I think that is, I'm not sure. I love the how things work books. Like, this is what the inside of the machine looks like. And so I love that. Like, how does this thing actually operate, and what does it look like, and can it be made to work better, and why does it do that? And I have that sort of tickles my fancy. Yeah.
No, you answered it.
Yeah. Okay.
Nailed it. I guess my if you can extrapolate that, where is this going?
Me personally?
No,
or
infrastructure as a service.
Yeah.
Are we entropying to just one or two big machines in the sky?
Probably. I mean, it's interesting because, I think that one of the topics that gets talked about at work a lot is the adoption of the cloud. And so, it had been perceived that the bigger companies were going to be slower to do that. They were going to think of I need to have my own computer, or I need to have my own this, that, and the other thing. And it turns out that the big clouds are better at running computers than they are at it. And so they've kind of realized I should go and I should start to put stuff in AWS, and I don't need to be putting it in my own data center in the basement or whatever. And so I think that the interesting thing is a kind of a question of, right now, Amazon gives you computers and services, but they also give them to you somewhere on planet Earth, and you have to make that decision right now. You have to say oh, I really want to run this thing, and I really want to run it in Sao Paulo. I really want to run this thing in Frankfurt, whatever. I think that from my perspective, the 10-year horizon that would be interesting is where you don't have to make that decision anymore, right? Where you're somewhere on planet Earth, I'd like a server and I need to do these things. And you don't have to make the decision about what data center do I put it in? Because how do you pick? I started using US West 2 at one point in time, I guess because I'm on the West Coast, but there was no rhyme or reason. No. And so I think that things that give you abstractions that are more I actually just want to think of it like a fully abstracted thing, and where the implementation of that might mean that let's say I want 5 servers, and I'm getting requests from a bunch of places, and the cloud decides, this server right now isn't doing a lot. I'm going to stop sending it requests, and I'm going to shut it down, and I'm going to bring it up over in Japan, because you're getting a bunch of requests that are coming from that Japanese from Asia Pacific. And now that server is just running closer to those things. And I didn't know that it moved. It just moved on its own. I think that is probably the most interesting thing, because you still are making a decision about putting a computer in someone else's data center, literally in a place, in a physical location.
It's literally not in the clouds.
No, it's just it's always going to be someone else's computer, but it has yet to live up to the cloud aspect to it. You still are making those decisions. Now, other clouds, I know Google, I'm pretty sure Google doesn't have regions. You just have everywhere, but you still have to make a decision about where this thing's running. And then once it's running, it's running. You got to just, if you want to move it, you want to do something else. And so I think that starting to, if we abstracted at those layers, the idea that a computer is or is not running, that becomes this super interesting little nugget to say, well, I don't know, if it's not getting any requests, don't run it.
Yeah, and that'll create this feeling of just we're in this network fog. It just is.
It just is. Yeah. And I mean, and that's what the desire for serverless is. And with Lambda and all the other functions as a service, that's the appeal, is to say, like, I don't care if you run or not, just run when you need to run.
Yeah. And I just have this little idea, this business logic, just go do it.
Yeah.
Does that excite you, serverless?
Serverless specifically is kind of narrow. You still are making a decision about where you're going to run it, by the way, even in those cases. I think it's interesting because it allows people. I'm all in favor of more constraints and seeing what people do with those constraints. Like, I know Lambda, you can only run something for like 5 minutes at most. Okay, great. What are you going to do with those 5 minutes? Right? That's an interesting, like, how are you going to build a thing that only works in that way? I think that those functions are meant to be like, do a thing, get back to me. I don't think that they haven't, at least to my knowledge, they haven't gotten over the point of being like, just run, just like go compute some genome stuff. Like, just do whatever you need to do. And if you decide, you want to take a break, take a breather, start yourself up in another data center somewhere. Like, we haven't gotten to that point. That, I think, is the interesting bit to me. I mean, part of the reason it's interesting is because it's foggy in my mind, whereas serverless, I can see how serverless works. Like, in my mind, I can see that, like, okay, you put that file there and you got this request and I started this thing up over here. Whereas, like, true location independent
omniscience
is foggy in my mind, and that fog is interesting.
Yeah. So now that we've gotten through the intro, I can now ask you, Evan, we're done, man.
We're done.
I don't know how this happened.
This is what happens when you talk to me. Ask my coworkers.
No, this is what happens when you're having too much fun. Thank you, brother.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks for hanging. Any questions for Eric? Or
no.
Okay.
Scott?
Scott?
No questions.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to the ctostudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.